Good evening. My name is Dr. David Doman, and welcome to another edition of Housecall. Are you stressed at work? Find out an interesting topic: health and wellness emotionally in the workplace. Find out more right now. My guest this evening is my daughter, Melissa Doman, a consultant who specializes in emotional health and wellness in the workplace. Melissa, welcome to Housecall.
Thank you. Long time no see.
That's right. I thought it would be interesting to cover this emerging new topic, which is really quite new when you think about it in the workplace.
Yes.
But before we discuss the topic at hand, tell the viewers about your professional background.
So there are two things in my life that have become extremely important to me. Number one, connecting with and empowering individuals. And number two is travel. I've had a number of jobs that have served a really wonderful purpose of enhancing who I am as a professional. But I always found that I navigated back towards how people tick and why they do what they do. I've always been a natural helper, whether it's with family or friends or coworkers. And throughout the years, I found I became an advisor or a mentor. And I found myself at the point when I was going to university saying, I think it's time I study this and learn how to do it so I can make a career out of it. So I went on to get my bachelor's from the George Washington University in Sociology and Communications, which is quite literally the study of people and how they communicate. And then I went on to get my master's in counseling psychology from Adler University, which is the study of the science of the human mind and the human condition and the change process. Throughout all this time, I've also racked up quite the travel list. I've been to 33 countries and 28 states with no intention of slowing down. Mm-hmm. And in the past 8 years, I've provided counseling, consulting, coaching, and workshops to both individual clients and small businesses and startups, and it's been quite the ride.
Explain to our viewers how you consider the global travel as having embellished your perspective on what you do.
I have to tell you that, and granted I'm biased, but one of the best ways to achieve well-rounded personal development is through leaping out of your comfort zone and exploring different places, people, and cultures. There's a very big world out there, and if you don't step outside of your own city or your own state or your own country, you don't come to know all the different experiences and all the facets of what it is to view the human condition. And so for me, as someone who acts as a facilitator of change, both for individuals and for companies, I consider the fact that I've been to 33 countries as quite the asset. I've experienced all different people from different walks of life who have different opinions of the change process, and truly gives me a better worldview of how I serve and work with clients.
What are some of the countries you've been to?
It's a very long list. We'll start with the most recent. Thailand, the Netherlands, England, Ecuador, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea. I actually lived there as an English teacher. Mm-hmm. I lived in Australia as well. And Tahiti, Bora Bora, Egypt, Israel, the list continues.
Do you find that you connect better with clients because of your global perspective?
Absolutely. Every single person is a snowflake. We're all unique. You cannot approach the change process, companies, individuals, with a cookie cutter approach. You just can't. You have to look at the context from which the person comes and meet them where they're at.
You mentioned change quite a bit early in our interview, mm-hmm. the change process with the workplace. Mm-hmm. Define that for our viewers.
So change is really quite the difficult animal. It's not easy, otherwise everybody would be doing it. So when it comes to change in the workplace, it involves a lot of involvement at all levels of the organization. A lot of times it really depends on the tone that is set by leadership, by managers, and the CEO. So oftentimes you see two different approaches within the workplace. You see top down, and then you see what's called flat. A flat organization, you are much more likely to get a lot of equal buy-in, as we'll call it. Whereas if you have top down, the people need to look up at the people who manage them. If they're buying into the process, then they will as well.
It seems that stress in the workplace has really become a hot topic now.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the stresses that are going on in the workplace, locally and nationally?
So there are some pretty startling statistics that actually affect people in the workplace that I think a lot of employers aren't thinking about. 120 million people report experiencing chronic stress. 40 million people report experiencing chronic anxiety. And 1 in 4 people report having a general mental health issue. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of people. The workplace is not immune to these statistics. And so a lot of the issues that are seen in the workplace, you see a lot of job-related anxiety or depression. You see a lot of inflammatory or unproductive communication between peers or between manager and supervisee. You see cultures of mistrust or fear that are created instead of encouraging employees to have a sense of open feedback, because everybody at a level in an organization can always learn something. There are a variety of things that are occurring. Employees are the fuel that keep the company, the ship, moving forward. Mm-hmm. If you don't replenish the fuel, if you don't take care of the employees, not only will they burn out and not last, but the company won't succeed. So the two are inextricably linked.
Is this a new problem, or is it rather that we're newly aware of it?
Newly aware of it, 100%. It's really that there's always been these sorts of issues, but there's a big difference generationally. So for example, how we work and why we work, that has drastically changed, not only in the past 10 years, but even the past 20 years. So for example, the baby boomer generation work hard, no matter what, keep plowing forward. Then you come to the millennial generation in their 20s and early 30s, and they say, but I want meaning and fulfillment, and I want to feel like my employer cares about me. So it's always been there. It's just a matter of recognition and how today's generations are processing that recognition.
Processing things differently. Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So given this emerging insight and perhaps escalating tension in the workplace, mm-hmm. What are some of the consequences health-wise besides chronic anxiety, depression?
There is a very long list, unfortunately. I've seen a lot of clients that have job-related, not only emotional health issues, but also chronic stress. One of the most common physical symptoms I've seen in people who are experiencing work-related stress is IBS.
Right. Irritable bowel syndrome.
Yes,
something
irritable bowel syndrome.
I see as a gastroenterologist.
Yes, so a lot of gastrointestinal distress, because stress can often manifest physically. Mm-hmm. So you see gastrointestinal distress, you see chronic headaches, you see migraines, insomnia is a really big one. And if you go back to the emotional, you see not only anxiety and depression, you see irritability, you see anger, self-isolation, withdrawal from pleasurable activities and hobbies. Mm-hmm. The list is unfortunately endless, and it's such a rampant problem that employers now are realizing they can't ignore this. They want to obviously have good work quality and work product, but human beings, we are consistently moving organisms that need care and tending to. So I think they're realizing that very quickly.
Now, I would imagine if I'm an employer, the boss, and I realize there is this undercurrent of potential tension in the workplace of my company, mm-hmm. It's not just a matter of the emotional and, as you've just demonstrated, physical well-being of the employees, but I would imagine you're aware of studies that deal with adverse effects on productivity.
Oh, yes.
Share that with our viewers.
What's interesting is I often see different kinds of companies that take one of two approaches. So they either take the short-term push approach or they take the long-term investment approach. The short-term push approach is where come in, do your job, I don't care how you're doing, I just want this project done and I only care about the bottom line. That might work in the short term, logically, but there's really no way it's going to last in the long term because that will breed burnout, absenteeism, unproductive arguments, and inflammatory communication between peers. It's just not going to last. But if you do the long-term investment, where you are providing employees an environment that is conducive for them to thrive, where you're giving them opportunities not only to do good work, but to grow professionally and personally, they are much more likely to be healthy and happy, and most importantly, feel valued, and will stay with the company.
I'm sure some of our viewers actually own their own businesses, their own companies.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think this might be a reason that some of these entrepreneurs see rapid turnover in their staffing if they're not addressing these very issues?
What draws me most actually to working with small businesses and startups is it is a brand new chance to create something new. The tone of an organization is set immediately from the beginning. Mm-hmm. That's an opportunity to...
The culture.
Yes,
if
the
I can
culture.
Interject.
Absolutely. The culture is set immediately from the beginning, where it's either a culture of growth and mutual learning, or it's a culture of I outrank you and you really should do what I say. So there's a challenge there because you want to make sure that people are getting their work done and they are contributing to the team. But at the same token, you are gathering not only job roles, you're gathering people. So as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, very early on, it's important to know about mindful leadership. It's important to know how to grow people, not just a product.
Have you found that the exciting new emerging technology sometimes engenders some of this anxiety and stress at the workplace?
Yes, people really have a problem of disconnecting from the screen. And actually, there have been studies shown that people who are very heavily connected into social media actually have higher rates of anxiety and depression. So disconnecting from the workplace is a huge coaching issue that I've dealt with really at the leadership level because they set that tone in the culture of whether or not they encourage employees to disconnect from technology at the end of the day, or they say, you better answer me at 9 p.m. at night if I email you. So
we're going to pause for a brief break. We'll be back in a moment for a public service announcement. More with Melissa Doman, consultant on emotional health and wellness in the workplace. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody! Heart disease affects 1 in every 3 women in America, but you can fight back. There's no time to lose. Mothers, sisters, daughters, families, and friends, it's time to shout louder, stand stronger, and demand change. Let's go!
To the Batmobile! Dang it.
To the invisible jet!
Dang it.
Together, we can put an end to heart disease. It's time to go red for women. I could use your help. Yeah! Learn more from the American Heart Association at www.goredforwomen.org.
We're back. My guest this evening is Melissa Doman, my daughter, who is a consultant specializing in emotional health and wellness in the workplace. Melissa, when we paused for the break, we were discussing the many aspects of this very important emerging topic in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So let's now drill down deeper and go into some of the important terms, specifically stress management. Mm-hmm. Define that for our viewers.
So stress management, the literal definition, would be using a variety of emotional and physical techniques to manage stress within reasonable limits. And within stress management, we have mindfulness. Mindfulness is one of the most proven and effective methods of stress management. Mindfulness literally means having a practice and appreciation of the current present moment and not being distracted by the past or the future. And that's a very good way to currently manage stress because oftentimes, especially with employees in the workplace, a lot of that anxiety around multitasking and competing demands often leaves them feeling quite harried or unable to focus.
Do you find that when you get together with clients, either the employer or staff members, they often lack insight into their behavior or the stressors or the emotional consequences they're experiencing?
Unfortunately, that's the majority of the people that I encounter.
Yeah.
So a lot of those folks haven't really had their aha moment yet. So the aha moment is when a counselor or a coach is working with someone and presents new information into the system that the person may not have considered, to which they then go, aha. So oftentimes I like to refer to clients or companies starting out with me as a horse with blinders on. If they're going forward and they have blinders on, they're really not aware of what else is going on around them until someone lets them know. So that's what makes the process so powerful, is me as the facilitator giving new information into the system, the company, to see how we can change how it's operating and thereby affecting employees, managers, leadership, and so on.
Have you found, therefore, that your background with the Adler School of Psychology has been helpful here?
Absolutely. While I definitely appreciate a wide variety of psychological theories and I've used them throughout my work, what I most appreciate about my Adlerian training, it is extremely holistic. And by holistic, I mean a person or a company does not exist in a bubble. They exist within a system. And oftentimes, if you see symptoms or problems, especially within the workplace, that means don't chase the symptoms. You have to look at what's underneath. If you fix what's underneath, the symptoms will naturally dissipate.
Let's go on to discuss other important terms in your line of work. What is viewed as emotionally unhealthy in the workplace? Define that.
So an emotionally unhealthy workplace, you'll see a variety of things. Number one, there is really no value placed on work-life balance. So for example, if you see a company where people are working 14-hour days and that's the norm, or if you see that there is very argumentative and unproductive conversations between peers, or you see that, let's say there are health benefits in the organization, but the company didn't care enough to get you a policy that includes mental health benefits. It all depends on the tone, the culture that is set in that organization, and that will there determine whether or not it is an emotionally healthy or unhealthy workplace.
Let's discuss then the mirror image, an emotionally healthy environment.
Unhealthy environment. So basically, the mirror image of that would be really the opposite of what I mentioned. So there is a focus on work balance. Okay. You see that they may get in at 9, they leave at 5. They have time for their family. They have time for their friends. They have time for activities. You see that employees are having productive conversations. You see that there is a feedback loop that's encouraged because everybody at the organization, no matter what the level, there's always something to learn. You see that an HR manager or a direct manager is easily approachable. An employee can come to them and say, I don't feel I'm getting the resources that I need your help. Those emotionally healthy workplaces, those are the ones that survive. Those are the ones that succeed. And usually you have leaders of those companies that are open to feedback. They are open to working with people like me who are giving them additional information on how to enhance how the company functions as a whole.
So you mentioned somebody who's working 9 to 5 and they're happy. Has there been studies that looks at somebody who's working a more conventional work schedule, working fewer hours than the first example, somebody working crazy hours, 14 hours a day? Are the people working shorter hours not only happier but more productive?
Absolutely, hands down. And it's very interesting you bring that up because you see a lot of American companies that are now leaning towards more of a European model. So for example, in the United States, it's very much live to work, whereas in Europe, it's work to live. And what's interesting is the people living in Europe have better quality of life, they have less chronic disease, and they have longer life expectancy.
Yes.
So a lot of American companies are realizing maybe they're onto something. Maybe if we get our employees to work smarter, not harder, if we take better care of them, we'll have the same amount of output, we'll be just as successful, and our employees will stay with us. So that's the direction that the smarter companies, the in-the-know companies are going now.
Have you found that I'll say, quote, an old-fashioned company that is still locked into old technology, paper, etc., Rolodexes, Yellow Pages, if they finally embrace the 21st century and install a whole software package to run their company, they're establishing a website, that for some of the so-called old-timers, this creates a great deal of anxiety?
I wouldn't call it anxiety so much as not understanding. And so it may manifest it as anxiety, but at the deeper level, it's just a lack of understanding. So for example, what I do with employees and with companies, you'll see people most likely below the age of 50. They understand the value. They understand why I do what I do. But then you have people that might be in the older bracket from the baby boomer generation who might say, just show up and do your job. I don't understand why you're doing this. This change makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
The approach I take with those people is not browbeating them with my approach. It's, I understand where you're coming from. And my way isn't necessarily better than your way, it's just different. But I encourage you just to hear me out.
Okay.
So oftentimes I'm able to win them over.
So you've made the case to our viewers that this is an important common issue, nationally and even internationally. What are some of the programs you can offer a company, an employer who says, you know, Melissa, it's no fun. We're in my company. We have constant turnover. There's no continuity. There's no institutional memory. Clearly, there's something wrong. So, what kind of programs can you offer the boss?
So through my business, number one, you have to start with assessment. You can't design interventions and programming until you identify the pain points. So I would come in and do an assessment that's not only quantitative but also qualitative. This might include questionnaires, in-person interviews. You have to get to know the people that you're hoping to take care of. So once I would get an assessment, then you look at severity. Do we have a lot of employees who just have a few misunderstandings and are mildly irritated, or is everyone hanging on by a thread? So based on the severity, we'll then determine the sort of services I offer. There are interactive educational workshops where they're not lecture style, it's everybody participating. True change requires input and buy-in from everybody who's involved. There are individual coaching sessions I can do, executive coaching, leadership group coaching. And if there is an instance where an organization is really in dire need, then I can be on retainer for them. And when I'm on monthly retainer, there are a wide variety of services that I can consistently offer to get them out of that desperation phase until they become more self-sustaining and stabilizing.
So you clearly provide a broad program for a company. Let's discuss then the employees. What do you meet with them individually, or how do you assist an employee who's stressed out?
Absolutely. So there are two levels of services I can provide in my business. So number one, for small business services, if there are individual employees that want to have individual coaching with me, absolutely more than happy to do that. And that might be the first time that they're experiencing something like that, where they have a neutral sounding board that they can speak to work on goals that may have been otherwise ignored. If they want to pursue private coaching with me, they can also do that. There is personal and professional development coaching, and it's really important to isolate concrete goals, taking out of the abstract, identifying a plan of action, being accountable, and taking initiative.
What kind of skills do you teach your clients?
Actually, you already mentioned a really big one, which is self-awareness.
Yes.
I think that self-awareness is the key to change. And also learning how to take responsibility for taking yourself from where you currently are to where you want to go. The most important thing that I can teach clients is this: you are part of your own solution. And when you recognize that, there's a lot of great things that can happen.
What are your thoughts about individual accountability?
Honestly, the change process can't exist without it. I think that individual accountability, a lot of people underestimate how important that is. Oftentimes, you'll see people waiting around. This isn't happening, or I haven't achieved this, because their locus of control, they look outwards as opposed to inward. Individual accountability is the cornerstone of the change process. If people want to achieve something personally or at work, it all begins with you.
They have to buy in.
Absolutely, they have to buy in.
What kind of resources do you tap into to assist clients?
So in addition to just doing coaching with me, or if I'm doing workshops with people, it depends on the person and their age. So for example, if I'm working with a younger client, in between our sessions, I might say, try this app. You can keep track of your goals and you can take notes on how you're doing, or go to this website. There's meditation music that you can listen to. If it's people who are into the more old school sort of interventions, and they really just want to focus on speaking with me or journaling, the more non-technological interventions, that's also wonderful. And if there are people who within the workplace have experienced so much job-related stress that's beyond my competency, seeking out the help of a mental health counselor is really useful as well, and I'm always happy to give people referrals.
Well, this has been a very productive interview. If our viewers have any questions, how can they reach you?
They can go to my website at www.melissadoman.com, which has a description of my full suite of services for both individuals and small companies.
Thanks for joining us at Housecall. I'm a very proud father.
Thank you.
My thanks to Melissa Doman for a terrific interview covering health and emotional wellness in the workplace. My thanks to my team here at the studio. And most important, my thanks to you, the viewer. With this episode, we are 4 years on the air and growing strong. Let us know how we're doing. You can reach me at my practice website, montgomerygastro.com. As for our next show, it's going to be a fascinating topic, an important one. Healthcare disparities for minorities in the state of Maryland, and in particular, Montgomery County. We look forward to seeing you then next time for another edition of Housecall. Good evening.